Welcome, Mr. Menotti, to Overtones.
Thank you.
I hear you're spending a lot of time in the air these days. What, between Australia?
Yes, alas, I think I should keep a cupboard in the plane with a change of suits and my shaving things and
A small kitchen?
and perhaps and a few sheets of music paper. I think I spend more time on planes than at home.
Oh, that's something, and a very nice home I hear you have in Scotland.
Yes, I think that I'm waiting for the blessed day when I'll be able to give up everything and just lock myself in my ivory tower and lead a happy sort of farming life.
Would you?
Because I do raise raspberries, in case you don't know. And if you
Really?
Yeah, if you like some of my raspberries, just write to Yester House and I'll send you some of my raspberries.
You must have to hothouse them there.
No. Well, we have a wonderful garden with and they grow outside, of course. It's not as cold as people think.
Not some parts of the
year. And I
year.
assure you, my raspberries are better than my music. So.
As long as we have no raspberries after your music is performed, very important. Well, we're going to be listening to some of your instrumental music because the world knows you as a vocal composer, but more often than not, the name Menotti is not attached to purely instrumental music, in spite of the fact that you've written a symphony and many concerti.
Well, I unfortunately, not only in this country, but all over the world, if they put a tag on you as an opera composer, that people don't even bother to listen to your instrumental music, and I feel a little bit sad about it because I think that some of my better music is instrumental and chamber music. Not so much my symphony. My symphony I want to rewrite. I don't think it is. I consider it an unfinished product, and when it will be ready to be published and to be heard, it's going to be a very different piece than one that is available now. As a matter of fact, I don't send it anywhere because I'm not very happy with it. But I do like my piano concerto, my violin concerto, my double bass concerto, and my cello. Well, that's not a concerto; it's a fantasy for cello and orchestra.
Double bass is a strange choice. Was that a commission or
an
inspiration?
Yes, that was a commission. Yes, it's like that was a very challenging commission, and but I had fun writing it, and I think it is a pretty good piece. And then I like my. So I only wrote 10 songs. 5 were written for Elizabeth Schwarzkopf. Unfortunately, she commissioned them the year that when she stopped singing. So she only sang them one season, and then she retired. But they have an Italian text and my own. Then I was commissioned to write 5 songs for tenor, and now I think I'd like to publish all 10 together, 5 in English and 5 in Italian.
Well, when you write for a solo instrument in the concerto form, for example, do you feel that you're, at least for your mainly melodic instruments, such as the cello fantasy or the double bass or even the wonderful violin concerto, are you dealing in the same dramatic way as if you have a persona on stage?
Well, in a certain way, I think that when you write for orchestra, you must think of each instrument as having its own personality, and just like it's about people, really. I think that's the wonderful thing about Wagner instrumentation, that it treats every instrument. I mean, every instrument is not brought in simply for sound or color, but they have something to say, which is it. That's the only kind of instrumentation I like. I don't like the instrumentation where the instrument brought in just to go and that's the end, you know. And, so I do treat my instruments as they were people.
Do you pay special attention to the people for whom you are writing the piece as well, their character, or is it more the character of the instrument itself?
Oh no, the character of the instrument. I don't.
Because hopefully
I live under the illusion that my music is going to live longer than the people that commissioned it.
Let us hope, yes. Every composer, of course, wishes that music to live on.
Yes, of course. It is really, I find it fascinating that even artists that don't believe in an afterlife they unconsciously they yearn for immortality. I remember once in Mount Kisco when I shared a house with Samuel Barber, and we had quite a few artists. I mean, with some painters. I can't remember exactly where they are, but I mean they were all pretty famous artists, and most of them said they were convinced that there would be no life after death. That once they died, they were dead. But then I asked, well, let me ask you, if you could be, if you had a choice, that is to have an enormous success while you are alive, so you can really enjoy it, and then be forgotten after you died, or the contrary, just to have a very difficult time while you are alive, but then know that your music or your paintings or your books would go on forever afterwards. Which one would you choose? Everybody chose the immortality, which doesn't make any sense, because if you don't believe that you exist after you are dead, why would you care whether your work would go on or not?
And yourself? Which would you choose?
Well, I believe in some sort of life after death. Yes, I believe that. I've said that in many of my works, that that death is a sort of an answer to to the eternal searching of the artist. That when you die, finally God is going to give you the answer you have been asking all the time, and the more you search, the more wonderful will be the answer in a certain way. I think that great artists like Michelangelo, like Dante, like Shakespeare, I think that death must have been a wonderful revelation. If that is not doesn't happen like that, then really God really is cheating us all the time. Because I mean, why have we have been given a brain that asks questions all the time? I mean, anybody who's civilized, that has any brain, asks. That's what the art is about, is a search. It's not, people think that we are creating. We are not creating. We are searching for some sort of an ideal beauty, an ideal truth. And we know we'll never reach it while we are alive. And, but I hope that this revelation, this searching for this eternal truth will be given to us as we die. That's why I'm not really afraid of death. I think that the moment I die, I hope that I've been given the answer to all my questions. If not, I'm going to be very mad.
Can art then form the function of perhaps giving a taste of the answer? Do you give bits of truth?
Yes, I believe very much in what I'm a neo-Platonist. I believe that with Plato that the artist or the philosopher, that we have a glimpse of the truth. We imagine, we see it, and then we try to capture it in our own work. And it's a form of memory, and it's very strange because I always believed in that. And then I read Picasso said the same thing. James Joyce said the same thing. That art is a form of memory. To say that you try to find what already exists somehow, at what let's call it the collective unconscious. You know, when people ask Michelangelo, how do you make your statues? I mean, how do you think of it? He said, well, it's very easy. You take a piece of marble, and then you take away what is too much, and there is the statue. And that is really what a musician looks for. This sort of to music that already exists in a certain way, which is inevitable, and that's the only kind of music I'm interested in.
Is that
inevitable music that can be that and nothing else? If you can change it, then it's not good music. There must be a certain inevitability in the music that is terribly difficult to find. But a composer knows when you have a good theme, you know you have it. What is a melody? It's something inevitable. And that is, I think, the great thing about art.
You must think it's rather amusing or smile to yourself when you think about this new generation of composers talking about neo-romanticism and now dealing with themes again. You never stopped.
I never. No, I must say, my whole career has been a very lonely career. road. I went my own way. I must say I like to write to collect in a book all the insults I received all through my life. I think they are more horrid than Malleus Maleficarum. I don't think there is a composer that has been insulted as much as I have been. But it doesn't really bother me, and all the attacks on my music, I almost welcome them, because I think that bad criticism is it's a sort of a thermometer that measures how strong your work is. If a critic can kill your work, then the work is dead to begin with. A critic, the best he can do if he hates your music is to slow its acceptance. But finally, I mean, the music wins. If one were to listen to criticism, we would have no Madame Butterfly. We would have we wouldn't even look at Stravinsky, the Rakes. I mean, he got horrible reviews to begin with, but then the music conquered at the end. So it's all right. I mean, your music has to be stronger than any of your enemies. And,
what are you criticized for?
God only knows. I mean,
for being romantic, for being melodic?
I think for being myself, for going my own way, I guess, because I don't fit into any especially musical current, and I'm not passionate about all the way I write the way I feel, but I feel that a composer is a man that has a family. You have to accept the tradition you come from, because I mean. You can rebel against your family, but you cannot hide the fact that you have a father and a mother. And my background is an Italian background, and I'm very proud of it. And also you must accept the limitations of your talent. You have a certain. Some people are born with a very funny face or a strange face that doesn't look like anybody. Fine, but sometimes, so you take somebody like Schubert. Schubert was not a very original composer. He was a great composer, but he did not try to be very different than more or less the music of its time. Neither did Mozart. Neither, in a certain way, if you take Scarlatti and Mozart, Scarlatti is a much more original composer, but Mozart is a much greater one. If you take, for example, again, everybody makes so much fuss about Gesualdo da Venosa, but his madrigals are not that good. Are very strange, very original, and very daring for that time. But well, so what? Orlando di Lassus was a much greater artist, not as original perhaps, but who cares?
A greater range of expression too.
Oh yes, I mean it's much more moving, and so it's not question of being original. It's to discover. We must be modest enough to realize that we do not create. We must discover what is already there, in our own way, and if we are honest. Our music will have its own personality, because no two faces are exactly the same. So, I mean, my long nose, I hope, shows well in my music.
Tell us about some of your experiments in early television. That was really new ground in the 1950s, writing specifically for that medium.
Well, actually, I broke new ground in spite of myself, because I tell you frankly, I hate television, I hate radio, and I will shock people. I hate photography. I like people with bones and blood, and anything that has to do with a machine terrifies me. And I find it, but I do recognize that today television is perhaps the most popular form of entertainment. I mean, that you cannot you cannot write for the theater and ignore television. I mean, that is something that we must accept whether we like it or not, or films for that matter. As a matter of fact, I've always been hoping that somebody would ask me to write an opera for the cinema, and I'm very sad that nobody ever did. And they asked me to do adaptation of my own works for films, but or for television. But I think that all those adaptations are a failure. I think that all these Othellos and Traviatas on television, I think they are perfectly horrible. I mean, I don't like them at all. Simply because I think that one could write an opera for television, but the television, I mean, the cinema has its own technique, and opera is just the opposite of the cinematic media. First of all, I think that opera has nothing to do with it's not a realistic form of theater, and you cannot have people standing in front of a real castle and sing an aria, you know, a Mozart aria, and make it believable. It is a completely different form. And it is interesting that people who just, you know, for many years, people say, oh, opera is some sort of very eccentric form of art and an eccentric form of theater, and it is not really to be taken seriously. But now, all of a sudden, people begin to realize that opera as a form of theater is probably the most exciting of all theater forms, and actually a very fundamental one, because certainly man sang on the stage before he spoke on the stage. I mean, Greek drama was essentially an operatic form. I mean, the people sang the choruses and sang the big speeches. And Chinese theater, Japanese theater, I mean, the classic theater is always sung. And curiously enough, recently, people who are great film directors that you would think would hate opera, they are beginning to be tired of films, and they all want to do operas. And in my own festival, I mean, I had so many famous film directors who asked me to come to do an opera. And we have Visconti, Fiorelli, Polanski, Louis Malle. I worked with them all. And then we had Bergman, of course, and Schlesinger. I mean, all people that come and they say, oh, please let me do an opera. I'm sick of films. I'm sick of photography. And they love the idea, the freedom. In a certain way, the stage gives me a greater freedom than the film.
Because they can create an imaginary dramatic space.
You know, they can do a thing.
There's no tie to reality, so it's.
And there's not that terrible thing of having to, you know, somebody comes into the left that has got afterward from the right, and things don't have to be real all the time.
Mm. But you did do some work with literally composing with camera angles and that sort of thing, taking advantage of the medium.
Well, I wrote the first radio opera, The Old Maid and the Thief, which can be heard without, you can imagine what's happening without having to see it on the stage. And the first television opera, which was, thank God, A Man in the Night Visitors, but that still pays for my telephone bill.
Very, very successful venture, and as you say, it's a yearly, it's a perennial. There's no question about it.
Well, I hope it will go on still for a long time. Well, actually, Amal has given me great joy because, not so much because it pays for my telephone bill, but because it has given me a chance to get in touch with so many children. I love children, and I love to work with children.
You've written many pieces.
And I have so many Amals all over the world, and sometimes it's a bit terrifying because I always remember them as little boys, and then all of a sudden I see somebody with a beard and with four children coming and saying, Mr. Menotti, I used to be your Amal, or 19, whatever. Then I realized that it was 50 years ago, and oh my God, I'm so old. But sometimes it is, you know, working with children, it's wonderful, but it's also dangerous and sometimes very painful, because children are thirsty for affection, for love, and many children you work with, have they are pushed by their parents to get on the stage and so on, and then when they work with me, I love children. I'm very affectionate, and being an Italian, I love to embrace them, to touch them, to kiss them, and we become great friends. And there is a very strong bond between me and my interpreter. And then when the work is finished, and then you have to betray the friendship, because you go away. You cannot go on. I cannot go on writing to every Amal I've known.
Full-time job.
It would be a full-time job, and they feel a bit betrayed, and it's very sad. And I had a very difficult experience. First of all, with my first Amal, Chet Allen, who was probably still the best Amal I've ever had. And he was an enchanting child, and for him it was an extraordinary experience because it was a religious experience. He was a very religious boy. And he believed in Amal, and he became Amal, but unfortunately he remained Amal all through his life. And he finally committed suicide, which is very, very sad, because he couldn't get out from that very first strong experience. And again, in one of my works, Martin's Lie, which I did for the Bristol Cathedral in England, I had to work with 17 little boys, all devils, absolutely. I took them all to Italy. They were so good. I took them all to Italy, but they were terrible. I had to put them. I put them on an island across from Venice because I was afraid of having them in Venice. I mean, we had to perform in Venice. And so they built a rafter, all 17 of them. They destroyed a boathouse. They made a rafter. And all of a sudden I had the mayor of Venice calling me up and said, "What are the boys doing in the middle of the Grand Canal, stopping all the traffic?" And they were all my cast. But then again I became great friend of all of them. And then when Martin's Lie was finished, the tour was finished and so on, every week I used to receive letters from almost all 17 of them saying, "Dear Mr. Menotti, my cat is better, and Mommy now is going to have an operation." And I answered the first couple of letters, and of course then I had to let it go, and you feel very guilty about that. So now when I work with children, I keep my distance. I've learned to control myself. I'm not trying to be a father to all my Amals. As a matter of fact, now just my son as a child, I finally have become a grandfather. So
congratulations.
I have my own.
Now those letters you must answer.
Those I have to answer. Well, by the time my grandchild will be 10 or 11, I probably will be already. I probably will have received the answer from God. The answer I'm waiting for.
Well, you've been a father to much more than simply your singers or your Amals. You've been the father of the Spoleto Festival, which has been brought a great amount of music to the world.
Well, that has been, I don't know whether that has been an achievement or a mistake. I mean, an achievement, yes, because the Spoleto Festival is a great success everywhere. I mean, in Italy and in Charleston and now in Australia too. The first year has been very successful. But it has taken a great deal of my time, and although I've learned a great deal, because being a dramatist too, at least I live in the illusion of being a writer besides being a composer, it has taught me to deal with a part of life that most composers ignore or they have no access to. Because in Spoleto, for example, I have to deal with the mayor all the time, with the chief of police, with the doctors, with the whole political life, and so as a man, it has enriched my life because I know what the community is made of, and I have to deal with people that I would not meet otherwise, or I would not even bother wanting to meet otherwise. And that's been very important to me, and also because I wanted to have this experience in a community. I believe that too many artists know humanity only, as entertainers after dinner. Samuel Barber always said, but in America, art is the after-dinner mint. And well, I didn't want to be the art. I don't see art as the after-dinner mint. I wanted to be the bread of the community. That's why I started Spoleto. I wanted to bring back to give the artist the dignity of being needed. Mm-hmm. And it has been a wonderful experience because Spoleto now, it was a forgotten city, and now it has been it is a flourishing city, and certainly the artist in Spoleto is the hero, because without the festival, Spoleto would again be forgotten probably, because the Spoleto is the only real life of the city. Once the festival is finished, the whole city becomes empty and
the population drops back down. What about Australia? Why Australia?
Well, Australia, well, you asked me, I asked myself why Australia. Well, because Australia, really, they sent somebody to see the festival in Spoleto. And then they went to the mayor and said, we would like to have this festival in Australia too. Well, I never thought I would want to start a third festival, but the mayor came to me and said, please, as long as you've done so much for our city, it would be wonderful to have Spoleto known not only in two continents, but in 3 continents. And you must finish your work.
You've only got 2 more continents to go, remember?
Well, I always say that the Spoleto Festival, the risks of becoming the Howard Johnsons of festival. But it has been interesting because it has also gotten forced me to be in touch with so many other artists and with poets, with painters, and in my experience, for example, with I staged Don Giovanni with Henry Moore, for example. The only time that Henry Moore has ever done sets and costumes was for the Spoleto Festival. Not only gratis, but even gave us $3,000 as a present at the end, because he was so happy. And as a matter of fact, it was interesting because he never gave us permission to announce the production. That's why it is not as well known as it should have been. Because he said, unless I see the whole production, all the sets on the stage lit to perfection and so on, I will not let you announce my Don Giovanni. So we would mount all the set, light and so on, then call him. He was in Carrara choosing marbles. And he would come and look at the set and say, well, that wall should be a little bit short, and that statue should be more to the left, and that more to the right, and that window should be a bit higher. So then I said, all right, fine. Then we saw and
all night long.
Then next day we call him back. And he said, oh no, that's too much to the right now. No, I think more to and day after day we had to change the set. And then finally, my assistant said, who also was working with Henry Moore, said, Mr. Menotti, you're making a great mistake, because you always, every time Henry Moore comes, he sits in a different part of the theater, so he sees everything in a different, said, always sit in the same chair, and you see that everything will be all right. So we did that, and then he finally was very happy. He said, now it looks right. And we still have the chair that we call it the Henry Moore chair. And then it was interesting because in the festival, for example, I had a great time. I became a great friend of so many poets, and that was a very moving experience. And very productive and very inspiring. As a matter of fact, I think I love the poets more than any other kind of artists. I mean, I think they are like overgrown children, charming, amusing, and naive in a certain sense. And but that was one. But then with painters, I mean, it's the Kooning stayed in my house, and we had many poets stayed in my house. So that I had a very close contact with all sorts of artists.
Well, your own background is not just in administration and in composition, but as a librettist as well. Was that something that arose as a need when you found your own music needed your own words, or was it quite the other way around?
Well, as I told you before, I have the conviction, and maybe it is an illusion, that I'm also a writer. And my drawers are full of poems and plays and short stories, and so that for me it was natural that I would want to write my own librettos. And that, of course, it is a great advantage, because it is difficult for composers to find the ideal librettist, and some composers never do, because writing a play is very different from writing a libretto. And the libretto has to be, first of all, you have to find a librettist that is willing to sacrifice his words to the impetus of the music. Sometimes you write a libretto, and then all of a sudden you set the words to music, and then the music wants to go to the right, but the words are going to the left, or that musically you made your point, and that's it. And there are still about 10 lines of poetry that you don't need anymore. You already said what you want to say. So you must find the libretto who's a bit of a masochist who will accept cuts or changes, or sometimes the music wants more words. And you feel that in Puccini's librettos, you can see that he fought with his librettist, and sometimes you feel that words have been added at a certain moment because he needs more music, or things have been cut. But that is also a danger when you do your own librettos, because sometimes you fall in love with your own words. And then when the music doesn't want to go the way your words go, then you have to fight with yourself and say, well, I hate to cut this line because they are such good lines, but I guess I have to. And that's probably one of the reasons why Wagner's operas are so long, because he couldn't bear to cut his own librettos.
What was it like writing libretti for Samuel Barber, though? There you got to be purely the word man, didn't you?
Well, for Sam it was very easy to write because I knew him so well, and I knew all the things he liked. So when I wrote the words for Vanessa, I knew what to write for him, and it was just the perfect libretto for him. I knew what to write for him. Curiously enough, it was for me a shock to hear the music, because as I write my words, I also hear the music in my head, and I would say I almost sing the words as I write them. And so that when Sam would play me some of the music, I would say, "Oh, Sam, that's all wrong." Well, listen, it's my opera now. But of course, I accepted very quickly. I accepted Sam's version of the musical version of my text. And
did you want to write your own after that? Your own music?
No. I think Vanessa is a marvelous work, and I can't understand why American opera houses are not giving it more often. I think it's a masterpiece, and I think it's one of the best contemporary operas ever written. And why it is not given, I cannot understand.
Often the musical criteria are not the ones that make productions, unfortunately. You've been in opera long enough to know.
No, but also, if I may say so, I know that we are doing this program for publishers, but it is very much also the fault of publishers. Publishers. We do not live anymore in an age where the publisher is the father of his composer. Where Ricordi was, or Breitkopf, and all the great publishing houses. I mean, they not only they loved their composer, but they protected them. They and they push their music, and they were part of their life. Nowadays, the publisher just simply prints your music and that's it. But Riccardi had to fight for his composer. He went to all the opera houses and pushed their work, and they did not care whether the work was a success or not. I mean, they believed, they had a belief in their composers, and they would fight for their works. Whether Madame Butterfly was a disaster when it was given, but Riccardi fought for it and worked with the composer again, and that's very important. We are now composers we are like abandoned children. That we go looking desperately for a home, but the publisher is not a home, and there's no opera houses that then gives us a real home.
Is it all economics? Do you think perhaps it's now
no,
time?
it's a lack. It's a lack of faith in what you have. I mean, it's now people want to see how much money they can make out of a product, and without really loving the product itself. But when you think of opera houses, I mean, it's they present contemporary works that they were paper napkins. You know, they wipe their mouth once and they throw them in the waste paper basket. It's very easy to get your operas done at La Scala and so on for one season, but that's the end. But very difficult is to find an opera house that will give you the operas again and again, and it gives you a feeling that you are at home. Now, when I first began, my first operas were at the Met, and I was lucky enough to start in a grand opera house. But that never was a home. It was a home only for my first two operas, and then, yes, they were given, but I never felt that that really was a home. So then, when the Sabbath I was at the head of La Scala, then I thought that would become my home, because the Sabbath insisted on doing the console, and doing the Saint Oblique Street, and Maria Golovin. I mean, just so then all of a sudden he died, and
you're homeless again.
And then so again I was I became a foster child, and then then I thought that the New York City Opera would be my next home, and most of my operas were given there, and then again it changed, and all of a sudden I was abandoned there. Now I think my home is probably the Washington Opera Company. I think they are, so far they give all my works, and I think that Mr. Feinstein believes very much in my music, and I think that he didn't, the bad reviews of the Goya that Goya had didn't affect him at all. He's giving the concert this year, and he's planning to give the Goya again, and he's busy getting the Goya done in Europe, and so on.
I hope you find a
So I
home.
hope that he will live a long time, and I finally found a home.
Well, one last question. If you did not have to spend all your time in the year between three continents, and all you needed to do was stay in Scotland, tend your raspberries, and have as much writing time as you needed, what pieces would you write?
Well, one cannot predict what one might write. What I would like to do now is not so much to write much more music. Actually, I think I've said most of what I want to say. But I feel that all my music is in a terrible state now. And it's not the fault of my publisher. It's my own fault. I don't. What has been published too much in a hurry. It's full of mistakes. And I would like to take stock of what I've done and put my house in order. Then I may think about what I want to write. But I feel very uncomfortable about having my music played with mistakes and with very, very vague notation, and even all these stage directions are wrong or not clear enough, and I really should take 2 years off and and start from the beginning and just have a definite edition of all my works. That's what I would like to do.
Well,
You know,
should we wish you continued antagonism from the critics? Would that ensure your good health?
oh, well, you don't have to wish it.
Well, thank you very much for coming down tonight, and the best of luck.
Thank you.